In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create these neat wood frames that you can frame your images in. It's a really simple process that I think you'll have fun experimenting with, because every time we do it, we kind of end up with a different result. So with that said, let's go ahead and begin. And I would begin by creating a fairly large canvas from which to work on. So we'll do a 20 by 20 canvas at 300 pixels per inch. And then I'm just going to kind of come up here and I'm just going to make a selection. The size of the selection and what have you is not really that critical. You can see about how big my selection is in relationship to the overall canvas of a 20 by 20. Now for my foreground color, what we'll do is we'll just pick a fairly light shade of gray, something other than white. So a light shade of gray will do good, and then we'll come over here to our layers palette and create a new layer, and then we'll fill um, our selection with our foreground color. And the easy way to do that, of course, is Alt or Option Alt backspace on a PC or Option Delete on a Mac. And then we'll deselect by hitting Control D or Command D for you Mac folks. And then we'll come in here, and from here on out, it's really just an experiment. So what we're going to do is we're going to just make a small selection up towards the top here. And then I'm on layer 1, and this is my original wood layer, if you will. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that selection and promote it to its own layer. So we're going to do a Control J or Command J on a Mac. And now you can see we have a separate piece here. It's difficult to see, but there's our selection on its own layer. Now what we're going to do is come over to our Effects tab here and come into our layer styles, and we're going to work with just these default bevels that come with Photoshop Elements. Now you can experiment with which ones you want to work with, but I like all of them really. But I'm going to start with the second one. And notice how just by adding that little bit of layer style, it already makes it kind of look like a piece of wood. And now that I see that, I'm actually going to stretch that and make that a little bit wider. And then I might just use my move tool and slide that up a little bit. And then why don't we make another selection? So let's go ahead and just make another selection right on top of that, like so. And then if you go over back to your layers palette, you see that we're on layer 2. So we're going to actually promote that selected area to its own layer, just like we did before, Control J. And notice, just like before, it actually took on the properties of the original layer. So now you can see. So what I might do here for this one is I might choose a different layer style. So let's just try this one. And you can just kind of click on all the different ones to see what effects you like. There is really no right or wrong. And I kind of like that effect. So we're going to just leave that the way it is. And then we'll come back to our layers palette here. Come all the way back down to our original layer 1 layer. And we're going to make another selection. And again, this can be as big or as little as we want. I'm just going to make a little tiny selection. And I'm going to promote it to its own layer. Control J or Command J. And now we have a new layer. Go back to our Effects tab. And I'm just going to use this basic bevel right here. You can see what we just created, that little strip. Now back over here in my layers palette, I'm just going to duplicate that little strip. So again, Control J, and I'm just going to use my move tool to nudge it down a little bit. Maybe nudge it even more. Okay, back to my layer 4 layer and move it down a little bit. So it's just a matter of experimentation, really. So back here in layer 1, we're going to make another selection. Promote it to its own layer, Control J or Command J, and then choose a layer style that we like. Now I'm going to zoom in tight here, and I'm going to use my free transform to stretch that a little bit wider, both at the top and bottom. Something like that. Alright, so I think that's good enough. So there is our piece of wood. Now back over here to our layers palette, you can see we have lots of layers now. And now we can just kind of merge all these together as one. So we'll just select them all and hit Control E or Command E, and that will merge all those layers together. And so that's our piece of wood. Then all we're going to do is grab our polygonal lasso tool, and if we click and then hold down our shift key, notice how we get a perfect 45-degree angle, which is really good for this example because that's exactly what we need. So back over here to my marquee selection tool, then I can pick up this selection and move it, and I can trim, just hit delete, and transform selection, flip horizontally, bring it over here, position it, and again hit delete and deselect. So now we have our little piece of wood, and then from here we can actually begin to build our frame. So I'll just make a duplicate that layer, and then I'm going to free transform, turn it around here, and I'm just going to line it up roughly, and then zoom in nice and tight, and then using my move tool and my arrow keys, I can kind of fine tune the exact positioning. Sometimes I like to turn off that show bounding box. Sometimes I like to have it on, sometimes I don't. But we zoom in nice and tight here so we get a nice corner. Once we get that corner established, then of course we can duplicate this layer and flip it horizontally. And all I do is just right clicking on it and choosing the flip horizontal option. Zoom right back in here, and we can again slide that over till we like the way it looks there. And then one more down at the bottom there, so we're going to duplicate the top layer, free transform, Control T, right click, flip vertical, and then pull that piece down. And one more time we're going to zoom in tight here and nudge it up till we get a nice fit. There we go. So that's the basis of our initial frame anyhow. And then sometimes what I like to do is I like to actually create an identical frame, but in a different instead of just being square. So we're just going to select all those layers, hold down the Alt key and click and drag so we can get a duplicate. And then what I would do is select just the bottom layer and the two sides and hold down the Alt key and drag. And we come back up here, and then we can delete that layer. So now we have kind of two frames. We have one that is a portrait orientation and one that is a perfect square. And of course, if we really wanted to, we could drag down yet another duplicate here. Select these three layers over here, drag them across. And then of course we would have a portrait version, a landscape version, and a square version. So that's kind of the basis of working with the frame. Now to kind of finish this off, let me just go back to just let's just go back to the one here. Now that you've kind of seen that process. So back to this one frame, what we would do is take all of these individual sides, merge them as one, so hit Control E, and then we can, because we chose that gray color initially, to color this frame, we can color it whatever we want to. So we can come down here to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer, choose this option right here, which it will clip that hue and saturation to just the frame. Actually, I'm not going to choose that right now because I'll show you what the difference is. So we'll choose colorize, and as soon as I do that, you can see we get the colorizing. Now the background is completely white, and so you can't color completely white. But let me show you what happens if I were to apply a gray background. So I'm going to fill the background with gray, and notice as soon as I do that, the entire background turns this purpley color. And back over here on our hue and saturation adjustment layer. So if I click on this button right here, it's going to limit the effects of that hue and saturation. So now that only my frame is purple. You see the background is its original gray color. So that's the difference. And that's just something to kind of keep in mind. So once we've chosen this colorize option, we can make this frame any color we want. So, and it's a combination of adjusting the saturation, the lightness, see how much darker the frame is, and then finally the hue, which gives it a certain color. So usually we start with the hue to get to the color we're looking for. Then we can adjust the, kind of put the lightness right in the middle, adjust the saturation, and then we can pull this lightness down to get to what we want to get to ultimately as far as the finished color. So I get that dark red color like in our example. All right, and then that's really all there is to it. And then finally what we could do is we could actually merge the hue and saturation to the frame. And doing so, now my frame is permanently red. Now we could, of course, even come in and add a hue and saturation adjustment again, choosing the colorize option. And again, we could change the hue. So the frame is still being able to change the color. So no problems there. We can, of course, adjust the lightness and so forth as well. So we'll hit escape and we'll just delete that because I'm happy with my red frame. And then finally, what I did was I just grabbed my magic wand tool, click inside my frame, and do a select, modify, and expand. And I usually expand about 50 pixels, and then create a new layer below. And this will become my image layer. So we'll just fill that with kind of a gray color. Now if we have our designer's toolkit, we can actually come over here and convert that layer that we just created into a frame layer. And then once we've done that, of course, then we can come in here and grab an image and drag and drop it into our frame. So you can see how nice effect that has. So that's pretty much it on working with and creating wood frames here inside Photoshop Elements. I think you'll have a lot of fun experimenting with creating your own wood frames. Thanks for watching.